They thought it was just an exotic pet. A beautiful lynx, raised like a house cat. Quiet. Mysterious. Harmless. But that night, when the fire came ripping through the Arizona forest, when the smoke choked out the stars and sirens cried in the distance, everyone ran. Everyone, except him. He didn't run. He chose. And what that wild animal did next, what he risked, shattered everything people thought they knew about loyalty, instinct, and love. Because in the end, it wasn't the humans who saved the day. It was the lynx. And he did the unthinkable. Stay with us. This story will change you. When fire came to Whispering Pines. The wind came first, hot, dry, and furious, howling through the trees like a warning no one wanted to hear. It twisted through the canyons outside Flagstaff, Arizona, stirring the pines into a frenzy, bending them like dancers caught in a fevered trance. Then came the smoke. It rolled down the mountain in a low, ominous cloud, thick and fast, swallowing everything in its path. The wildfire had jumped containment lines miles away. No one expected it to travel this far, this fast. But nature doesn't ask permission. By the time emergency alerts buzzed through the phones in Whispering Pines, a quiet forested neighborhood nestled along Forest Service Road 418, many of the residents had already started packing. The Reeve cabin, tucked at the edge of the treeline, was the last on the road. And inside that cabin, Clara Reeve lay unconscious on the hardwood floor. She had fallen. One careless step on a rolling paint can at the base of her closet had sent her crashing down, striking her head against the corner of a low shelf. Her easel had tipped with her, canvases scattered like forgotten prayers around her still body. The room reeked faintly of turpentine and lavender oil. And standing over her, wide-eyed and trembling, was a North American lynx. Rye. 4 years old. 70 pounds of pure muscle under silken silver-gray fur, with black ear tufts twitching at every distant siren. His bobbed tail flicked anxiously. He circled Clara's motionless form, letting out a low rasping yowl that echoed unnaturally through the quiet cabin. His paws, massive, snowshoe-like, padded back and forth, his wild instincts colliding with the domesticated rhythm he'd known his whole life. Smoke began to seep through the window cracks. A faint orange glow flickered outside. Something primal stirred in Rye's chest, something ancient. But he didn't run. He stayed. He sniffed Clara's face, pawed gently at her shoulder. Her breath was shallow. His wide amber eyes scanned the room. The back door was locked. The front windows now glowed with an eerie red tint. And then, the explosion. A transformer on a nearby pole burst with a sharp crack, sending sparks arcing through the air. Rye jumped back, his ears flattened. He turned and bolted toward the kitchen, claws scraping the floor, and in one swift leap, launched himself through the pantry shelf toward the back window. Glass shattered. The lynx hit the ground running, his body low, fast, vanishing into smoke. The air outside was blistering, full of embers. Flames crawled down the hillside like living things. Half a mile down the road, a fire crew was clearing brush near a culvert when one of them, Miguel Alvarez, 28, ex-Navy, looked up and froze. "What the hell?" he whispered. A wildcat was charging at them. "Back! Back!" another firefighter shouted, raising his axe. But Rye didn't stop. He skidded to a halt, turned, and bolted back up the hill, then stopped again. Looked back. Waited. Miguel stepped forward, squinting through the smoke. "He's trying to lead us?" The others hesitated. Another wind gust bent the flames toward the ridge. Time was vanishing. Miguel didn't wait. "Let's go," he yelled, breaking into a run. Rye sprinted ahead. And in that moment, not a soul watching could deny it. This wasn't just a wild animal running from fire. This was a guardian racing toward it. The girl and the ghost cat. Before the fire, Clara Reeve lived a quiet life. Not silent, but quiet, like the hush of snow falling in the woods, or the stillness before dawn. At 25, she had carved out a sanctuary for herself at the edge of Flagstaff's ponderosa forest, in a weather-worn cedar cabin she'd inherited from her late aunt. She wasn't the kind of girl you'd find scrolling social media or sipping lattes in trendy cafes downtown. Clara was different, sun-kissed skin from hiking alone, freckles dotting her cheeks like constellations, and hair always tied back in a careless braid, more out of practicality than fashion. Her eyes were a shade of blue that felt cold at first glance, but softened if you stood still long enough to earn her trust. She made her living painting wilderness, ravens in snow, elk against twilight ridges, and lately one recurring subject, a silver lynx with fire in its eyes. Art galleries in Sedona and Prescott sold her work, enough to get by. Not rich. Not struggling. Just floating in her own orbit. But Clara's calm wasn't without scars. She had lost her parents at 17, car accident on an icy mountain road. No warning. One call, and her world collapsed. From that moment, she had drifted through life like a ghost with a heartbeat. College felt too noisy, the city too cruel. So she left. The forest became her therapy. And the animals? Her company. She volunteered with wildlife rehab centers, learning how to handle injured owls, raccoons, coyotes. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it was with precision, like every word had weight. People sometimes called her the wild girl behind her back. She didn't mind. Let them talk. When the lynx came into her life, it didn't feel like fate. It felt like recognition. She found him during monsoon season, just a kitten, soaked and half-starved near an old timber logging road. Most would have left him or called wildlife control. But Rye looked up at her with those huge golden eyes. No hissing, no fear. Just waiting. She named him Rye, after the wind-blown color of his fur and the way he moved through the trees like ripples in grass. Raising him was a battle and a blessing. At first, he shredded curtains, climbed furniture, howled at night. But then, he learned. And so did she. She applied for a license to keep him as a non-releasable exotic animal, submitting paperwork, attending hearings. They inspected her home, evaluated her enclosures. It took almost a year. But in the end, they approved her. The lynx wouldn't survive alone. And with Clara, he didn't just survive. He became her shadow. Everywhere she went, painting on the deck, walking the ridge at sunset, watching storms roll in, he followed. Not like a pet. Not like a wild thing either. Something in between. Something deeper. She never taught him tricks. Never tried to tame him. Because Rye wasn't hers. He chose to stay. Rye wasn't born to be tamed. But he was born to survive. It was during the first monsoon of the summer, 3.5 years ago. Thunder cracked over the canyon like splitting bones, and rain came in sheets, drumming against the hood of Clara's truck as she drove the remote service road in search of a red-tailed hawk reported injured near a trailhead. She almost missed him. A small wet shape stumbled out from the underbrush just ahead of her headlights. She slammed the brakes, heart in her throat. It wasn't a coyote. Not a house cat either. It was a lynx kitten. Soaking wet, legs too long for his body, tail nothing more than a fuzzy bob, ears flicking with that signature black tuft like antennae to another world. His fur was matted with pine sap and blood. His right forepaw had a deep gash, likely from barbed wire or a predator's bite. He didn't hiss or run. He just stood there, drenched, trembling, watching. Clara opened the door and stepped into the storm. He didn't flinch. Kneeling down, she extended a gloved hand. The kitten blinked slowly, deliberate, feline, ancient. Then, against every rule of nature, he limped toward her. No tag. No mother nearby. No sign of a den. Just this one strange, silent survivor. She wrapped him in a wool blanket and placed him on the passenger seat. The whole drive home, he never made a sound. Just stared out the window, his wide eyes reflecting lightning strikes. At first, she did what protocol required, called the Arizona Department of Game and Fish, filed an incident report, submitted photos. But a wildlife official visited and, after a brief inspection, left her with only a warning: he's too young. Imprinted. If he survives, he's not going back. And he barely survived. For weeks, Clara fed him with syringes and bandaged his wounds. She slept next to his crate at night, whispering stories into the dark. At one point, he stopped eating for 2 days. She thought he was slipping away. Then, just as suddenly, he rebounded, stronger, wilder, faster. She built him a custom enclosure beside the cabin, reinforced with beams, chicken wire, logs, platforms, and a sheltered den lined with fleece. She let him come and go freely through a dog door she installed in the kitchen wall. And Rye, despite his independence, always came back. He grew fast. By his second year, he stood 2 feet at the shoulder and weighed almost 70 pounds. His paws looked comically large, made for snow, but here, they padded silently across pine needles. He stalked birds for fun but never killed. He chased squirrels only to sit beside their trees and wait, tail twitching like a riddle. Sometimes at night, Clara would wake to find him lying beside her, his body curled like a comma against her back. Sometimes he watched her paint, eyes locked on the brush like it was prey. And always, he was watching. Rye was never truly domestic. But he was never truly wild again either. He lived in the thin space between instinct and intimacy. He lived with Clara. Because something in her broken soul had called to him once, and something in him had answered. Conflict and connection. For the first year, no one even knew Clara had a lynx. Whispering Pines was one of those forgotten roads just far enough from Flagstaff to feel like the edge of the world. No streetlights, loose gravel, pine needles blanketing every roof. The kind of place retirees and recluses moved to for the silence. And Clara fit in perfectly. At first. But Rye grew. By the time he was 4, he stood taller than most dogs in the neighborhood. His gait was different, fluid, predatory. His ears were too long, his stare too intense. And one day, when Clara walked him on a lead through the wooded trail behind the community mailboxes, the illusion shattered. "Oh my God," someone gasped. "That's not a dog." Clara turned slowly, shielding Rye with her body. The woman across the path, thin, tightly wound, with expensive hiking boots and a trembling golden retriever at her side, was already backing away. "What is that thing?" the woman demanded. "He's a lynx," Clara said calmly. "His name's Rye. He's licensed. Fully legal. And safe." But the woman wasn't listening. She was staring at Rye like he'd grown fangs and sprouted wings. Her dog, Milo, began barking, loud, frantic. Rye didn't flinch. He simply sat, eyes fixed on the golden retriever, silent and unreadable. That evening, Clara received an email from the Whispering Pines HOA. Subject: concerns regarding exotic pet. From then on, the tone of the neighborhood shifted. People pulled their children closer when she walked by. Conversations stopped when she entered the local feed store. One man, Derek Morrison, even started walking door to door with a clipboard, collecting signatures to have the wild animal removed before someone gets hurt. Clara never confronted him. She didn't need to. Rye's presence was enough to unsettle anyone who didn't understand him. But the whispers weighed on her. She'd moved out here to heal, to be alone, not to be feared. The situation boiled over one Saturday at the edge of the community park. Clara had brought Rye out early, before sunrise, hoping to give him time to roam the open field near the pines. She didn't see Derek until it was too late. "What the hell are you doing, Reeve?" he barked. Clara turned. "He's leashed. We're on public land." Derek's German shepherd, Tank, strained against his collar, teeth bared. Rye remained still, hackles down, but his eyes narrowed, body coiled. Not aggressive, watchful. "Leashed or not, that's a predator. You're putting everyone here at risk," Derek snapped. "You don't belong here. That thing belongs in a cage." Clara's jaw tightened. "He's not a thing. And I belong here as much as you do." "Oh yeah." Derek stepped forward, chest puffed. "Let's see how that holds up in court when someone's kid gets mauled." Rye let out a low growl, not loud, just enough to make Derek freeze. Clara placed a calming hand on his back. "He hasn't harmed anyone. Ever. That doesn't mean he won't." Derek spat the words like venom, yanking Tank away and stomping off, muttering something about lawyers and bringing this to the council. Clara stood there for a long moment, the early morning sun creeping over the horizon. Rye turned his head slightly, nudging her hand with his nose. Not seeking comfort, offering it. She crouched beside him, buried her face in his thick fur, and whispered, "Maybe we really don't belong here." But Rye stayed silent, steady, his body warm against her own. Because whatever the town thought, whatever fear or ignorance clouded their judgment, he knew his place. It was beside her. And no petition could change that. After the confrontation with Derek, Clara stopped walking Rye through the neighborhood. She didn't need the stares, the whispered gossip, the tension that coiled like barbed wire under her skin. Instead, she found peace where she always had, higher up, deeper in. A trail behind her property led to a rocky ridge that overlooked the Pine Valley, and beyond it, the peaks of the San Francisco Mountains. Not many knew about the path. Fewer still dared to hike it after sundown. But for Clara, it was sanctuary. For Rye, it was home. That evening, just before sunset, she slung her canvas bag over one shoulder, a thermos of tea inside, and her sketchbook tucked under her arm. Rye padded beside her, silent as ever, his massive paws pressing into the dirt with almost supernatural grace. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, rustling the aspen leaves like secrets being exchanged. When they reached the ridge, the sun was already painting the sky in strokes of molten amber and indigo. Clara laid out a wool blanket on the flattest rock and sat down, knees drawn up, sketchbook open. Rye circled once, then lay at her side, chin resting on her boot. His breath was slow, rhythmic. His body, a warm weight against the coming chill. She dipped her pencil across the page, capturing the light's edge, the shadows it chased, and the shape of Rye's ear against the sky. For the first time in days, her chest felt loose, her heartbeat calm. The chaos of petitions and angry neighbors drifted out of reach. "You're not a monster," she murmured. "They just don't see what I see." Rye blinked once. Then turned his head slowly to look at her. His eyes caught the last light like twin embers, watchful, intelligent, ancient. A hawk cried overhead. Somewhere far off, coyotes began their evening chorus. The forest around them stirred with life, but none of it felt threatening. It was a music Clara had grown to understand, notes in a language Rye had spoken since birth. She remembered the first time he sat still for a painting. He had curled in the corner of her studio as she worked, watching the movements of her hand as if learning something unspoken. Since then, he'd become a kind of muse, an ever-present spirit in her work. Not a subject. A partner. She turned to a clean page and began a new sketch, Rye mid-yawn, stretched across a fallen log. The image had burned into her mind a few days before, and it had waited patiently for this moment to come alive on paper. As she drew, flashes of memory flickered in her mind. The night he lay beside her during her first panic attack. The time he herded a rattlesnake away from her porch with a low, eerie snarl. The quiet moments, too, him curled at the foot of her bed, or nuzzling her palm when the world felt too loud. She looked at him now, this magnificent creature who moved like smoke and felt like safety. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "I'm not giving you up." Rye didn't answer. He didn't need to. He stood, stretched, and walked to the edge of the ridge. From there, he stared down into the darkening forest, ears alert, body still as stone. Clara watched him, feeling the moments stretch long and timeless. Then slowly he turned his head, glanced back at her, and sat. A sentinel. A guardian. A soul too wild to own, too loyal to leave. Clara set her sketchbook aside and sipped her now lukewarm tea. Night crept in quietly, wrapping the woods in deep blue shadow. It was the kind of peace most people never get to feel. The kind you only find at the edge of the world, beside a creature who should have never let you in, but did. And in that stillness, Clara believed. They would be okay. The fire returns, trial by flame. The warning came as a whisper, then a roar. It had been dry for weeks. The kind of dryness where even the air crackled with tension. Pine needles curled on the ground like tinder waiting for a match. Every evening, Clara stood on her porch with Rye, watching clouds roll by but never break. The forecast teased rain. The sky never delivered. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, lightning struck. One clean bolt from a brooding sky, and somewhere deep in the Coconino National Forest, a spark ignited the underbrush. Within hours, it was ablaze. The fire crews called it the Pine Crest wildfire. Locals just called it the One. By midnight, it had jumped 2 ridges. By morning, it was barreling toward Whispering Pines like a freight train. Clara didn't sleep that night. Her phone buzzed with alerts from the county. Evacuation level, set. Prepare to leave. She stayed calm. Collected. This wasn't her first fire warning. She'd lived through dry seasons before. But this one felt different. The smoke crept in before dawn, not thick, but wrong. Sharp, acidic. Rye sensed it first. He paced from window to door, growling low in his chest. His ears twitched constantly. He didn't eat. Didn't lie down. He was waiting. At 6:12 a.m., the alert changed to go. No time left. Clara sprang into motion. She shoved clothes into a duffel, grabbed her sketchbooks, a flash drive, her wallet, a bag of Rye's frozen meat, and his emergency kit. She opened the cabin's back panel, calling for him. Rye. Let's go, baby. It's time. He emerged from behind the couch, ears flat, eyes wide. The air outside had shifted. Ash was falling now, tiny gray snowflakes drifting across the yard. Sirens blared somewhere below. The fire had reached the southern bend of Forest Road 418, just 2 miles away. As Clara reached for her first aid kit in the hallway closet, her foot caught on the edge of a spilled paint can she'd left from the night before. The metal clanged as it rolled beneath her, and she went down hard. Her head slammed into the corner of a wooden shelf. A burst of white light exploded behind her eyes. Then black. She didn't get up. Rye rushed to her side. He sniffed frantically at her face, licked her cheek, pawed at her arm. Nothing. She was breathing, but barely. Smoke seeped through the cracks in the walls now. A low, thunderous growl rumbled from outside. Not thunder. Not a truck. The fire was here. Flames licked the treetops. The heat distorted the glass of the front window, the sky outside bleeding orange and red. The world had become a furnace, and inside it, Clara was still. Rye stood over her, trembling. His instincts screamed at him to run. To flee into the woods. Escape. Survive. But he didn't move. He looked down at Clara again, then at the smoke, then back. And something in him changed. He bolted to the kitchen, slammed his weight against the pantry shelf, and leapt straight through the back window. The glass shattered. His body hit the ground with a thud. He rolled once, then took off. Through smoke. Through fire. Toward the only hope Clara had left. And far down the hill, just barely visible through the haze, a line of yellow helmets was clearing brush near the firebreak. Rye ran for them. The smoke had thickened into a wall, choking the mountain air into something sharp and toxic. Every breath felt like swallowing sandpaper. The fire cracked and howled behind the trees, alive and hungry. But Rye didn't slow down. His paws thundered against the dry ground, claws scraping rock, pads scorched by stray embers. He ran with purpose, not panic, his eyes locked ahead, his breath fast but steady. Behind him, the cabin faded into flame. But in his mind, Clara's face was still clear. Still breathing. Still waiting. Down the slope, a crew of firefighters in heavy gear moved through a clearing, hacking at brush with axes and shouting coordinates into radios. One of them, Miguel Alvarez, helmet tilted back, sweat streaking his soot-covered face, looked up just in time to see a blur charging through the smoke. "Lynx!" someone shouted. Another firefighter raised a hose nozzle defensively. Back. Back. Rye didn't stop. He darted forward, then stopped 10 feet from the crew, pacing in a wide arc, circling frantically. He let out a low guttural cry, not a growl, not a roar, something deeper. Urgent. Almost pleading. Miguel froze. "Wait," he said, holding up a hand. "Something's off." Rye backed away a few steps, turned, then looked over his shoulder. His body language was unmistakable. "Follow me." The others hesitated. "You think he's leading us?" Miguel's instincts kicked in, first from his time in Afghanistan, then from years with the fire department. He'd seen animals do strange things under pressure. But this wasn't random. This was intentional. "I'm going," he said, tightening his grip on the axe strapped to his belt. "You're following a cat?" one guy asked. "It's not just a cat." Miguel locked eyes with the Lynx for 1 second, just one, and that was enough. He sprinted after him. Rye bolted, weaving through fallen branches and smoke-choked air. Miguel kept pace, stumbling a few times but never losing sight of the wild silhouette ahead of him. The fire had curved around this side of the hill, creeping up from below. Time was running out. Finally, through the smoke, the outline of a small cabin appeared. The porch was already ablaze. A loud pop shattered the air, paint cans exploding inside. Miguel covered his face with his arm and rushed in through the side. "Fire rescue," he shouted. Rye clawed at the floor beside a motionless figure, Clara. Miguel's heart clenched. He dropped to his knees, checked her pulse. Faint. Shallow. But alive. He didn't waste a second. With Rye pacing in frantic circles, Miguel hoisted Clara over his shoulder and kicked the back door open farther, charging out into the growing inferno. Another firefighter appeared, hose in hand. "You got someone?" "Yeah." Miguel barked. "She's unconscious, needs oxygen." They raced to safety, smoke swirling like ghosts around them. Rye followed, close and silent. When they reached the edge of the clearing, Clara was lowered to the ground. Oxygen mask on. Pulse stabilizing. Eyes fluttering open. Miguel looked back at the lynx, who now stood just beyond the tree line, watching silently, his fur streaked with ash, whiskers singed. "He led us to her," Miguel said, his voice raw. "That animal saved her life." The others stared, stunned. One of them took a photo, smoke rising behind the lynx like wings. Rye gave one last glance at Clara, then turned his gaze to the horizon. The fire hadn't beaten them. Not today. Not while he was watching. The guardian in the ashes. The hospital lights were too bright. Clara winced as she opened her eyes, the sterile ceiling tiles above her unfamiliar and cold. Her head ached in a slow, dull throb, and her lungs stung with every breath. The scent of antiseptic mixed with something deeper, smoke, memory, fear. Then it hit her. The fire. The cabin. The foal. "Rye," she croaked. A nurse appeared at her bedside, placing a hand on her shoulder gently. "You're safe. You're in Flagstaff Medical. You inhaled a lot of smoke, but you're going to be okay." Clara gripped the sheets. "Where is he?" "My lynx, Rye." The nurse smiled. "He's alive. He's in the wildlife intake unit across town. Minor burns on his pads and whiskers, some singed fur. But nothing serious. He didn't leave your side until you were safe." Clara's breath caught. Relief and gratitude surged through her, so overwhelming it made her dizzy. "He stayed." "Oh, he did more than stay," the nurse said softly. "He found you help." Later that day, Miguel Alvarez stepped into her hospital room holding a helmet under one arm and a coffee in the other. "You're the girl with the ghost cat," he said with a grin. Clara blinked, trying to place him. "I was the guy he dragged through the woods," he added. A laugh escaped her lips, hoarse and cracked but real. "You followed him?" He nodded. "He wouldn't let me say no." They talked for an hour. Miguel recounted every second, how Rye had emerged through the smoke like a phantom, how his movements were too deliberate to ignore, how he'd led them right to her. The whole crew had watched in stunned silence as a wild animal became a rescuer. "He saved your life," Miguel said. "No doubt." And just like that, the story spread. Local media picked it up first. Lynx leads firefighters through smoke to unconscious woman. Feline hero saves wildlife artist in Whispering Pines blaze. Then came the phone calls. News networks. Wildlife officials. Even a morning talk show. Clara turned them all down. This wasn't about going viral. It was about the bond between two beings who had saved each other long before the fire ever started. Still, not everyone took the news kindly. A letter arrived 3 days after she was discharged. Notice of petition to revoke exotic animal permit. Filed by none other than Derek Morrison. Clara stared at the envelope, her jaw tight. After everything Rye had done, after risking his life to save hers, they still wanted to take him away. But she wasn't alone this time. Miguel showed up the morning of the hearing, dressed in his formal station uniform, a binder under his arm. "I'm testifying," he said simply. "I already submitted the video footage and the report." Clara looked at him, stunned. "Why are you helping?" He shrugged. "Because people like you and animals like him don't come along often. And because if that lynx hadn't done what he did, I'd be attending a funeral instead of standing here." The hearing was short. Miguel's testimony was powerful, clear. The footage spoke for itself. Rye, pacing, leading, returning. Clara unconscious on the floor. The rescue. In the end, the Wildlife Board not only let Clara keep her permit, they created a new designation, exotic emotional companion, emergency licensed. It was rare. It was controversial. But it was real. Rai came home a week later. His paws were bandaged, his fur still singed at the tips, but his eyes, those steady ancient eyes, hadn't changed. He stepped into the cabin, looked around at the walls stripped bare from fire damage, and padded silently to the center of the room. He sat. Clara stood in the doorway, her throat tight. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. Rai turned his head and blinked once. Later that month, the community gathered in the clearing behind the rebuilt park to unveil a small wooden statue. Carved by a local artisan, it depicted a lynx standing over a woman's fallen body, flames in the background, its head raised as if calling for help. The plaque beneath it read, "Rai, Guardian of Whispering Pines. In honor of courage that knew no species." Derek didn't attend. But Milo, the golden retriever, did, alongside his owner, who now watched Clara with quiet awe. Milo approached Rai slowly, tail wagging. For a moment, Clara held her breath. Rai sat calmly. Milo licked his nose. And just like that, the ice melted. That evening, Clara walked with Rai back up the ridge. The trees were scarred, but still standing. The sky above glowed with the kind of gold you only see after fire has swept the world clean. They sat in silence, the wind brushing past them, familiar and soft. "You don't owe me anything," Clara said, staring out at the mountains. "But I hope you know. I wouldn't be here without you." Rai didn't look at her. He didn't need to. Because in the quiet between them, something unspoken passed. Deeper than words. Wilder than fire. Stronger than fear. He wasn't a pet. He wasn't a rescue. He was hers. And she was his. Forever. The end.